What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind the scenes stuff. Arm yourselves, typology stuff. We're making this video because I was reminded recently of something about type pairs. A type and their shadow. For me, this is INTP and ENTJ, but I think this is true of all type pairs. As different as each type and its shadow is, by definition, they're also technically two sides of the exact same coin, and you see that in usually singular characteristics or a defining theme of the individual. For example, and we'll get into other examples later, I think the shared defining characteristic between INTPs and ENTJs is purpose. And I think these singular unifying characteristics in type pairs are always there, but you don't start seeing them until you start getting exposed to your shadow more. And then once you receive that exposure, it starts to come out a lot more. Example for the INTP-ENTJ connection. INTPs usually have a pretty good sense of internal direction. Not that all INTPs are pointed in the same direction, the opposite is the case in my opinion. But the issue is, without exposure to ENTJs, we have no ability to do much with it. Or rather, we don't realize that capability is there. We don't have access to what we have until your shadow shows you do. And it's interesting because you see something similar with ENTJs. ENTJs, the stereotype, they are these commanders, they are these bulldozers, they are these indomitable forces. But in my experience, that is not even close to what the standard baseline ENTJ is like. The basic ass ENTJ is like a drifting jack of all trades. And this is another thing. ENTJs, I don't think they start out as commanding presences. When you speak with a lot of ENTJs, a common pattern you'll find, some are excellent, born excellent, but not most of them. Most of them spend the first segment of their lives getting pushed around a lot, used and abused, being steamrolled rather than steamrolling. And I think that's because a lot of ENTJs don't have that internal direction to start with. Or rather, same with INTPs, it's there, but they need someone to help them realize it's there. And then they become purpose engines. But once the type pairs have been exposed to one another enough, and especially when they go into the type pair fugue state enough times, they start looking and thinking a lot alike. Because they are two sides of the same coin. And that coin, for INTPs and ENTJs, is purpose. And that's why I love us. I've learned to take a lot of pride in myself and in my comrades because we are the world's entertainment. We are the type pair that keeps things interesting. Where would society be if INTPs and ENTJs weren't keeping things interesting? We think the things people don't think, and we do the things people don't do. We single-handedly turn the wheel of fortune. And if you, INTP or ENTJ, don't feel that way, you should probably spend more time around one another. I've suspected for a while the current president of our nonprofit is an ENTJ, and while we aren't going fugue state, because that would be bad, even we have been mildly expanding one another's potential. And I have a brief anecdote I was going to start the video with, but we're putting it here because we needed to set everything up. Normally, the type pair fugue state, at least for INTPs and ENTJs, in my experience, sometimes it's an immediate thing, other times it is a slow build-up into an immediate thing, but when it hits fast. I was dealing with a different ENTJ recently, and we immediately started getting into fugue state mode. But she pulled the brakes, and I don't completely blame her for that, because there was no way that was going to end in a happily ever after. But still, you allowed your fear to kill the magic. But here's what I'm talking about with type pair connections. The fugue state, the synchronization. She was trying to have the magic without embracing the risk inherent to the type pair fugue state, which it's not going to work. Also, it's annoying. So I blocked her when she started short-circuiting. However, I had no ill will toward her, and I still don't. And I'm pretty sure she sneakily deployed a game that worked that wouldn't have worked with any other type of person. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was her. If I had to bet money, I would bet a medium sum of money that of the people it could have been, it was her. First, she started by insulting me in an alt account in a way that actually hurt my feelings pretty badly. And it's funny because people, especially people from the Discord, before they leave, there is always a fuck you for the road thing. It's a tradition now, I think. That, or at least the things they say, don't bother me. What they'll do will upset me, but what they say usually doesn't. YouTube comments, those frustrate me more from a dealing with the mob of Joe and Jane dipshits perspective. Those do get under my skin, but not in the soul-piercing way. Not in the JFK way. Someone left a comment on the post I made when Discord was dead, so I put the weightlifting update there. 4 words. Don't skip leg day. That shit hurt so bad. I was punching the air for 3 days after that, because I used to have a reasonably juicy and kissable ass and thighs, as you can see, but that's when I did leg work seriously, or at least as seriously as I was lifting back then, and they don't look that good now because I do skip leg day. I don't have the juiciest ass and the nicest thighs because I'm lazy. But the reason that upset me wasn't even the laziness accusations, because people could accuse me of being lazy about a lot of things and be right, and it not bother me. Why did that bother me so much? That hurt because I'm losing in a competition I could and should be competing in. It's difficult to feel too bad when you're losing a competition you feel you have no place in, but when you're falling short of other people, especially a dude falling short of other dudes, when you know you could be better because you were better and you're now inferior, that is deeply upsetting. And also with the physicality of it, you can't even argue. And if she had just left it there, that would have been the perfect assassination. That would have been an ideal hit and run. But with minimal hit confirmation, she knew that bothered me, and then followed it up with a fumble. Taking the sting out of the hit, missing a couple follow-up shots, and then leaving clues at the crime scene. Which, again, almost makes this feel like a murder mystery that was laid out to solve, which was fun. But while I was playing this game, I was thinking about what the purpose is. And I concluded it was a misplaced effort to motivate via irritation. But it worked, kinda. I probably won't be doing a lot of leg day, but I want my ass back. Also, I don't like that there is a clear, easy vulnerability right there. And this speaks to what I'm talking about with the type pair connections. It's hard emotionally to snipe me that cleanly and then proceed to fuck it up. You're shaped like the clowns from Mysterio's Funhouse. That's a deep cut, but I'm sure some people will enjoy it. Type pairs get really in sync and then can make interesting things happen. It's weird having a mild mind meld, but it's a different story having one of these intense type pair mind melds. It is a highly unstable connection that stays stable using centrifugal force. You stay up by going faster, not by slowing down or steering in a different direction. You can do that. Oftentimes the connection will explode when that happens unless the disconnect is handled by a masterful hand like mine. But even washout mind melds are nice. One, because they remind you they are out there. Mind melding is a thing, sometimes you forget. Two, because you do usually still learn something. Some parties more than others, depending on levels of advancement. And three, because if nothing else, it's still interesting. What was interesting about this washout was how the plug pulling looks, or what happens in a person's mind when they unplug but don't know what to do or how to deal with it. Because we went from anticipating one another, as we do, understanding one another without words, as we do, and giving unto one another as needed, as we do, to not understanding anything, to misreading everything, to... It's like watching a chicken run around with its head cut off. It was like she wanted to stay within the magical stream, but she didn't have the nerve to go with the flow. And that's grody. That's lesser and lower and inferior. I don't mind the breaks or the disconnect. That's reasonable. What I dislike is trying to eat your cake and have it too. I didn't realize Kaczynski that was the way he said it, because that's the only way that saying makes sense. We're nicking that. I dislike anyone who tries to make their inability to make a decision my fault. But as a heterosexual male, this is what we're going to have to deal with, I guess. Also, INFJs suck. They're stupid. They're the worst about this. Inability to take responsibility. Hollow on the inside. Also, no longer a queer ally outside advanced lesbians and select dudes. Israel is a patsy. Jews aren't the problem. And adherents of Abrahamic religions are tools, useful stooges of whatever the great enemy is. Might as well upset everybody while we are here. The level of connection you achieve when you're synced with your shadow is difficult to understand if you've never felt it. And we're going on and on about this because even though I dislike other types or I disagree with what other types represent or whatever synthesis leads them to, I think you'll live at your happiest when you reek of your shadow type. When you've had great exposure to them, when you've shared mind melds with them, when they've brought out whatever this shared thing is in you and you've brought it out in them, you've made a science of it. And also, I want more people to be doing this so I can see what happens when other types do it. I have a sense of what happens with other types. I have a sense of what connects some pairs. Examples, ENFPs and INFJs, I think, are united by aesthetics. Both types are deeply concerned with convincing the mob they are something. Every ENFP wants you to believe they are greater than they are. And that's the same thing with every INFJ, but they go about it differently. ENFPs work to have, to possess, and to do enough shit associated with some archetype or some vision of themselves to try to make you believe that's what they are. Because a person who has these things and does these things, they must be this archetype. That's what every ENFP does. Whereas with INFJs, difficult to put into words, it's like they weave a web of vibes and aesthetics. It's not as much about possessing things, it's not as much about doing things. It's more like they weave a web that's a matrix, and then they lull you into crawling into it. It's the same thing, but a completely different method. And of course, this shared thing, the singular word I'll use is aesthetic. It's inferior to purpose, but there's room only for one type pair at the top. So, sucks to suck. ENTPs and INTJs. Dallying. This might be a little more obvious in ENTPs, but I recommend you look at INTJs too. These types rarely go anywhere. And this is true even of ENTPs I idolize like Patrice O'Neill. It doesn't feel like they are pushing anything forward. Rather, what they're doing is pulling apart and putting back together what is right here. These two types are at their most productive when they are not being very productive. ENTPs will endlessly pull everything apart until they find something interesting, which is typically, that behavior is typically attributed to INTPs, but that's not the way INTPs operate. We go really deep on specific things. We don't fuck around with everything indefinitely. And with INTJs, they are so stubborn and ugly and useless. I don't think that's a shortcoming. I think that's a feature. Because if INTJs were actually able to do anything, they wouldn't get the pleasure out of finding perfect ways to do something and then torturing themselves with the fact they aren't doing them that way. Versus an ENTJ who will just do the thing because they aren't as concerned with perfection as they are having something. That's why most INTJs are man-children and woman-children. You are cognitively obligated to exist in arrested development. Once again, a disgusting and inferior combination. I don't know enough about ENFJs to even theorize on the INFP-ENFJ pair, their singular thing. But a complete shot-in-the-dark guess with no elaboration, organization, which is a shot-in-the-dark loaded with implications that we can't do anything with right now. So we'll move on. The ISTP-ENTJ combo. That's an interesting one. Because if you didn't know this, while it's somewhat common knowledge ISTPs are pretty spacey, ESTJs are also very spacey. When you deal with an ESTJ that is unplugged from society, they're rather psychonautish. It's when you plug them into society and then also get them hooked up with an ISTP who's on the same wavelength, somehow they're at their most and least annoying. I think their word is baseline, like within cells interlinked. Because you put them together and their energy is high intensity room temperature. They make mundane shit magical. And I haven't researched this fully. The word might be different, or what exactly is happening here might be different, but I feel confident the purpose of this pair, or their type pair connection, is to reinforce the status quo or to establish a status quo and then make it not feel like a status quo. And I don't know enough to comment on or even take a shot in the dark on any of the other ones. But that leaves us stuff to research if we ever get around to it. In summary, type pairs, a type and its shadow, they are unified by a single concept which each side arrives at independently and in their own way. And if you want to unlock this side of yourself, you want to be exposing yourself to your shadow as much as possible. Low level exposure is good. Mind melds, if you can get them, a lot better. And also, not all type pair connections are made equal. They're all essential for a healthy, growing, developing society, but some are better than others. And if you're an INTP or an ENTJ, try hard not to feel too guilty about your own superiority. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.